A couple of weeks ago, I started playing Splitgate, and for a really long time, portaling around was just something that I would do because it felt weird not doing it, like I wasn't playing the game properly. It was never really to gain the upper hand in a firefight. I was just like, well, I guess I'm standing here right now, and it would be cool to stand over there, so... Hey. But eventually, I finally started realizing that I could do stuff like this, and I said... Oh, okay. I've said this before about the pedestrian, but Splitgate is one of those games that makes you go, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Portal has been around for so long and it was already a first-person title, and those two games are considered to be some of the greatest games of all time, so how did no one think of incorporating this into a multiplayer shooter until now? Splitgate really got me thinking about more examples of experimental genre combinations in video games and how they can keep the medium fresh in a time where some people believe we're stagnating in game design. We've kind of gotten past the point where a new genre can just appear out of nowhere, like Kojima basically inventing the stealth action genre with Metal Gear Solid. That's just something that doesn't happen as suddenly as it once could. See Kojima's less successful attempt to push the whole Strand type game idea. I think it makes way more sense from both a creative perspective and a longevity perspective to try and stretch and combine and mold what we already have in unique ways that end up making them feel brand new. With how new the video game medium still is though, stuff like genre bending is sparse and probably a lot more subtle than it'll eventually end up being. With music and film being a fair bit older, we can see how effective creating unique, sometimes surprising combinations can be as long as it's not done crudely, but past entertainment we can see this in plenty of other things as well. Do you guys remember that scene from Ratatouille when Remy eats a block of cheese and a strawberry separately and experiences their individual flavors and individual sensations, and then he tries them both at once and they come together to create something that neither one of them on their own was able to replicate? Represented by this mini fireworks show that incorporated elements of the individual tastes while also showing just how enhanced both feelings were through that combination. You do remember that scene? Yeah, this video is basically that. That scene is not just a visualization of cooking, but just how important it is to have balance, contrast, and complementary factors in anything in life, in order to get the most out of it. That balance can be very difficult to hit, and some artists, chefs, directors, or developers may fail in an attempt to clash different flavors by doing so in an unceremonious way. Much like how even though sweet and sour can often go very well together, you can't exactly just drop a bunch of sugar into a bottle of vinegar and chug that bad boy. And so while we've definitely had some more outlandish examples of clashing genres in gaming, we're still mainly in the realm of even experimental games being somewhat adjacent to proven formulas. It's a lot like fries and ice cream. Yeah, it seems weird and some people still can't get behind it, but you see the logic that got us there. French fries are usually dipped in something, that something is usually somewhat contrasting the temperature of the fries, and sometimes that something is also a little sweet, so ice cream as your dipping sauce is sort of the next logical step. That's opposed to something like pickles and peanut butter. Who's responsible for this? The video game equivalent for something like that is like a turn-based racing game. That's an idea that's just landing you directly into bad genre mix Arkham Asylum, which is actually the setting of a Batman cooking simulator. Some of the most experimental games as of right now are still dependent on more standard ideas to act as a proof of concept of sorts that lets them know if their idea will work. The assortment of French fry dipping sauces to their ice cream, if you will. Here's one of my favorite examples. Doom. To be clear, Doom isn't the actual genre bender here, it's the proof of concept. Doom 2016 is awesome for a lot of reasons, but one of the many things that this game executed incredibly well was its soundtrack. Not just the heavy metal fist-pumping music on its own, but how that music was integrated into the game. As you fought, the music would rise and crescendo following specific cues. It felt like it was part of a call and response with your inputs and on-screen actions. And this is one of the first times that a game like this, a popular AAA action game, especially a shooter, contained music which felt like it was more than just a part of the background. It was basically on the precipice of being a full-on game mechanic. So then someone said, what if it was a full-on game mechanic? BPM is an amazing shooter that came out last year that clearly takes inspiration from Doom. It's got the metal soundtrack, the demonic enemies, the harsh red environments. Maybe it goes a little bit too hard on that than it needs to, but it was an aesthetic choice, I don't mind it too much. It's clear that this game probably wouldn't exist if Doom 2016 didn't exist, but rather than make a clone of that title, All Interactive decided to take the unique mesh of music and gameplay in Doom and bring the music all the way up to the front, creating a full-on rhythm shooter game. You can only shoot, pump a shotgun, dash, or reload if you're on beat. That beat is steady and pretty easy to follow, and the indicators near your sights are a nice helping hand in case it ever gets confusing, so it's not a painfully challenging mechanic to wrap your head around. But it perfectly blends the high-octane action from Doom-like shooters with the feeling of unison with the music that you get with rhythm games. Even after hearing the same few tracks again and again, I was still bobbing my head because I was always engaging with the music. And I felt like an absolute badass every time I rhythmically massacred a room, with every shot hitting on beat and every reload feeling more satisfying than it ever has in any other game. We haven't really seen many rhythm shooter games before, so BPM does feel very new and experimental. But you can definitely see how this unique blend of genres came out of the positive response to a similar but slightly less radical idea introduced in that Doom reboot, which kinda harkens back to this comparison I made. BPM is also a roguelike, adding on even further to its unique blend of gameplay, but if I'm gonna talk about a genre-bending roguelike, I feel like I need to bring up Dead Cells. This is one of the first games I ever played that messed around with multiple different genres, and is also the game that I credit with getting me more into roguelikes, actually at all. Which is another thing that I think makes products of this ilk very special. They can act as bridges between two different genres, one that you love and one that you may not have ever touched, which gives you a way to dip your toes into something completely new in a way that feels a bit less jarring than it otherwise would. And yes, I did mix an analogy of a bridge with an analogy of you getting into water. Clearly, I don't understand how bridges work. Dead Cells is a roguelike Metroidvania, which sounds like an indie developer's wet dream right now. One of the cool things about Metroidvanias is unfortunately really closely related to one of the less cool things about Metroidvanias. You're able to explore places that you've already been to with some newfound abilities. All of a sudden being able to open up a door you couldn't have before, or finally getting that secret item that's been teasing you for hours. It gives you the ability to re-explore areas with a new sense of wonder and achievement, but it also means that you end up trekking very familiar ground super often. Sometimes all for very little reward, and often while not feeling as challenged or as inclined to accept the challenges that were already posed to you as you were earlier because you've been there, done that. Retextualizing an area through extra abilities makes it engaging, but all of the stuff that you've already done that was fun as your less powerful self becomes a chore. By combining the Metroidvania formula with the roguelike formula, you ensure that the player is basically exclusively dealing with retextualized areas and not with the mundane retreading. You get new abilities as you progress in the game, which maybe let you enter certain areas or break floors or whatnot, but that's not even what I'm talking about here. By starting you off on square one and randomizing what you end up getting each time around, no two runs of this game feel the exact same, even though the places that you're going are, aside from a bit of procedural generation, effectively quite similar. Different enemy placements or elite foes also add some fun into the mix, and because randomization is such a core part of the roguelike genre, Dead Cells can get away with more of these same place, different scenario moments. And that fixes the problem with Metroidvania locations and exploration while emphasizing some of what makes it cool. This time around, the game didn't look at the beginnings of a promising idea and turned its impact up. It looked at something that contained some good and some bad, and it paired it with something that brought out those good elements and made the bad ones feel like a mere whisper. And while I may have dug myself into a hole with the whole cooking parallel, since I can't cook and even boiling an egg is a daunting task for me, pairing two things together so that one brings out the best in the other, I know that's something. That's like a really important thing, right? I feel like I've definitely heard, like, you know how certain pairings bring out the flavor in, I don't know, man. Cut me some slack, okay? I basically exclusively ate at fast food places throughout university. I'm not exactly a master chef, alright? I opened this video talking about Splitgate and the simple but genius idea. What if a multiplayer shooter was also Portal? And you can see how it looked at both the promising implications of portaling and using momentum cleverly in movement as a way to solve puzzles and traverse complicated areas, and the kind of fun but kind of messy and annoying effects of having crazy movement options at your disposal in a multiplayer shooter, and it used all of that information to make a really satisfying new experience. Your movement options on your player are solid, but it's not a who's who of complicated movement. You can jump and jetpack or whatever, but it's very limited. There's no wall running or dashing or even sliding in this game. But with portals, your movement options explode outwards into infinite possibilities. You can make smart plays to get behind opponents, but you can also intelligently cover your back to prevent something like that from happening to you. And you also gotta keep moving and not camp if you're against good players, because people might not just be coming from the entrances, they could be coming from the roof. It gives the game a high skill ceiling, and it has the ability to empower even low-level players while encouraging better players to be more active and clever. Whether you're mixing multiple genres or multiple games together, I think it's always important to understand how exactly you can improve on or fix or strengthen the ideas from existing games in a unique way through what you're trying to blend together. Instead of just throwing together two individual interesting ideas and thinking, hey, that might be fun to see. Even the most outlandish combinations out there, ones that don't have as logical of a thinking process to get to the final product as what I discussed in this video, they still need to understand the core makeup of what they're playing with and how perhaps turning that on its head would still be enjoyable. A really great example of this has to be Yoku's Island Express, a pinball platformer. Who even thought of making pinball this important to a modern game? You guys are crazy. But it's such an interesting game because instead of allowing you to control the thing that's moving through the environment, you're now controlling the environment to move the thing. You genius sons of bitches. Video games have gotten this bad rap over the years for being too samey and formulaic. And on one end, I can see that criticism, but on the other end, I feel like it's very overblown and only applicable to specific studios or publishers. Still, I think there's only so far we can go with some of these ideas standing on their very own. There's only so much plain rice you can eat before saying, hey yo, let me add some chicken curry to this thing. And I think even though we've seen some of that experimentation throughout the industry, we're still sort of in the infancy of this idea. All that does though is make me excited for how games will continue to transform and bend and merge together. How maybe a few years from now some of my favorite games might be from genres in which I have no interest in currently, like card games or turn-based games. All because something came out that tied their mechanics with other mechanics that I'm more familiar with, and all of a sudden, now I'm hooked. Roguelikes have already proven the exciting implications of this idea. That's a genre that's basically made to pair with other genres. And once it found its footing and people started understanding how it could enhance other games, it absolutely took off and gave us some of the most unique titles out there. And one can only hope that developers are keeping a keen eye on these possibilities, because if they are, gaming is about to get even weirder and even better than we currently think is possible.